Someone you love is controlling you right now, and they're doing it with their pain. They've learned that your empathy is a lever, and every time they pull it, you move exactly where they want you to go. The worst part is, if you try to stop it, you'll feel like the villain. And that guilt, that sickening twist in your stomach when you consider saying no, that's the entire mechanism working as designed. Emotional blackmail runs on a cycle so predictable, you could set a clock to it. A demand gets made. You resist. Then comes the pressure, sometimes as tears, sometimes as rage, sometimes as a silence so loud it fills every room in the house. You cave. Relief floods in. And the cycle resets, except now the threshold for what triggers it has dropped a little lower. Psychologist Susan Forward identified this pattern decades ago and gave it a name that stuck. She mapped the anatomy of it down to 6 stages: demand, resistance, pressure, threats, compliance, repetition. 6 steps. Clean as a machine. And that mechanical quality matters because the people doing this to you often have no idea they're running a program. That's what makes this so hard to confront. Your mother calls and says she supposes she'll just spend the holiday alone since nobody cares enough to visit. Your partner says if you really love them, you'd skip the work trip. Your boss implies that people who leave at 5 clearly aren't committed to the team's future. 3 different settings, the same architecture underneath. If you don't do what I want, something bad happens, and it'll be your fault. The tools vary. Forward categorized them into 4 types based on the primary weapon. Punishers threaten direct consequences. They'll leave, they'll cut you off, they'll make your life miserable. Self-punishers turn the weapon inward. They'll hurt themselves, they'll fall apart, they'll spiral into depression, and you'll have to watch knowing you caused it. Sufferers don't make explicit threats at all. They just make sure you know how much pain your choices cause them. A sigh here, a pained look there. The unspoken message, your independence is injuring me. Then there are the tantalizers. These are the most sophisticated operators. They dangle something you want: approval, a promotion, love, inclusion, and attach conditions. Do this for me, and maybe you'll get what you need. The carrot stays perpetually just out of reach. So why does any of this work on adults who are otherwise sharp and capable? Because emotional blackmail targets a specific vulnerability. It works on people with a high sense of responsibility, a deep fear of conflict, and an overdeveloped empathy reflex. In other words, it works best on good people. The kind of person who rereads a text 12 times wondering if they were too harsh. The kind who apologizes first, even when they did nothing wrong. The blackmailer learns, usually through trial and error rather than conscious strategy. Which buttons produce results? A child discovers that crying makes a parent reverse a decision. A partner notices that threatening to leave ends every argument in their favor. A manager figures out that implying job insecurity keeps people working weekends without overtime. Each successful cycle teaches the blackmailer that this tool works, and it teaches the target that resistance is more painful than compliance. Over months and years, something shifts inside the person on the receiving end. Their world shrinks. They start running decisions through an internal filter. Will this upset them? Before considering what they actually want. The filter becomes so automatic they forget it's there. They describe themselves as easygoing, flexible, low maintenance. They've confused self-erasure with virtue, and the body keeps score even when the mind doesn't. Chronic compliance under emotional threat produces the same stress markers as other forms of sustained psychological pressure. Disrupted sleep, jaw tension you notice only when a dentist asks why your molars are wearing flat. A vague dread on Sunday evenings that you attribute to hating Mondays. The workplace version deserves its own examination because it hides behind professionalism. A manager who says, "I'm disappointed in you," wields a different weapon than one who says, "This report needs revision." The first targets identity, the second targets output. Emotional blackmail in professional settings often disguises itself as high standards or team loyalty. The person working 60-hour weeks because their boss guilt trips every vacation request rarely frames it as manipulation. They frame it as dedication. Here's where it gets complicated. The person doing this to you probably loves you. Actually, not probably. In most cases, they genuinely do. Emotional blackmail is most common in close relationships, precisely because closeness provides the raw material. You can't leverage someone's fear of abandonment if they don't care whether you stay. You can't weaponize guilt in someone who feels no obligation toward you. The intimacy is the ammunition. This creates a brutal bind. Walking away from a stranger who manipulates you is simple. Walking away from your mother, your partner, your best friend of 20 years, that requires you to hold two truths at once. This person matters to me, and this person is harming me. Most people collapse that into one: either the relationship is fine and I'm overreacting, or this person is a monster and I need to leave. The middle ground, where love and damage coexist, is where most real situations actually live. So what breaks the cycle? Boundaries. But the word has become so overused, it's almost meaningless now. So let's get specific about what a boundary actually looks like in practice. A boundary defines what you will do, not what the other person must do. "Stop guilt-tripping me" is a request. When this conversation turns into a guilt trip, "I'm going to hang up and we can try again tomorrow," is a boundary. The difference matters because one requires the other person to change. The other requires only that you follow through. And following through is where it falls apart for most people. The first time you enforce a boundary with an emotional blackmailer, the pressure intensifies. This is so predictable that therapists have a name for it: an extinction burst. The behavior gets worse before it gets better, because the blackmailer's system is screaming that the old tool stopped working, so they push harder. If you cave during the burst, you've taught them that escalation is the answer. The cycle returns, stronger. Surviving the burst requires something uncomfortable: tolerating the other person's pain without rushing to fix it. Your mother will cry. Your partner will rage. Your boss will give you the cold stare across the conference table, and you have to sit in the discomfort of knowing you caused that reaction while also knowing you did the right thing. Both are true at the same time. This is where most advice falls short. It tells you to set boundaries, as if boundaries are a switch you flip. They're a practice. Some weeks you hold the line beautifully. Other weeks, the guilt wins, and you find yourself driving 3 hours to a dinner you said you wouldn't attend, sitting in the car afterward wondering how that happened again. The real shift comes from changing how you relate to guilt itself. Guilt, after saying no to a reasonable request, signals you've done something wrong. Guilt, after saying no to an unreasonable demand, dressed up as a reasonable request, that's trained compliance signaling that you've left the script. Those two feelings are identical in the body. Telling them apart requires slowing down enough to ask one question: did I do something harmful, or did I just fail to do something someone wanted? That single question, practiced consistently over months, rewires the reflex. The guilt still shows up, it just loses its authority. One more thing worth sitting with: if you recognized yourself in this script, you probably recognized yourself on both sides. The person who's been blackmailed and the person who has, in moments of desperation, reached for the same tools. A well-timed sigh. A guilt-laden, "fine, do whatever you want." A withdrawal of warmth designed to punish. Most people toggle between both roles, depending on the relationship and the stakes. Seeing the pattern in others is the easy part. Catching it in yourself, mid-sentence, feeling the manipulation leave your mouth before you can stop it, that's where the actual work lives.